Good morning, everybody. This is Michael Ellis, and I'm the publisher of Rural Lifestyle Dealer Magazine. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today for this morning's webinar with our managing editor, Lynn Woolf. And we're going to dig into some of the numbers behind the 2019 Dealer Business Trends Report. This morning, we're going to take a look at which products dealers are expecting to be the hot sellers this year, how they are adding or expanding to their product lineups, and what their major concerns are. So we've got a lot of ground to cover today. But before Lynn gets going, I just have a couple of housekeeping items on your screen. There's a control panel with a Q&A icon. You can submit questions there at any point throughout the presentation. And time permitting, we're going to answer as many of those questions as we possibly can. Any questions that we don't answer during the live event, we'll send back to Kansas with Lynn, and she will post those answers to the website. And if for any reason you lose your internet connection or we lose our connection at some point during the presentation and it looks like things have been interrupted, go back to the email that you received earlier telling you how to join this morning, and you can just re-enter that way. With that, we should be ready to go, so I will turn the controls over to Lynn.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm really looking forward to talking about what we found this year with our latest report. As Michael said, we'll be diving into some numbers. We'll be looking at some trends. Also, we asked our dealers some open-ended questions, so you'll hear some comments directly from dealers. And then we'll also take a look forward into what we see might be impacting your businesses this year. So we'll just dive in here. In terms of the survey, it's our 11th annual survey. So we're very pleased to be able to have a really solid decade of data for you, and it's the only one of its kind in the industry. So we're really appreciative of those dealers who have been responding all these years. It's really important for us to make sure that we understand the industry and we understand your businesses and what the topics are that you need to have covered. And also, I think it provides a good baseline for you as you're comparing your dealership against what others are experiencing across the country and across North America. We had 164 respondents. The dealers, as I said, are across North America. And as Michael mentioned, looking at a lot of numbers, revenue, aftermarket revenue, top products, and all of that. Who our readers are, who are responding, about 50% are owners or managers. And so that means for us that they really have the pulse on what's happening within their market and within the numbers within their dealership. And about 70% have revenues of 2.5 million or more. So you can compare yourself to who our readers are and who is responding. The breakdown, this is about what we usually have. Generally, it's about 80% US and about 20% Canada, so around that this year. And generally also we have about 70% have 20 or fewer employees. So another metric for you to compare yourself against. This is one slide that I really enjoy looking at every year. And this has to do with the market itself. And you can see that for the dealers that have been serving our market for more than 16 years, a significant amount of dealers. And so I think that really speaks highly for you dealers in terms of understanding this market early on, diving into this market early on. I would guess that if you looked at 16 years ago and some of the articles that were being written, I'm not sure that the word rural lifestyle was even being used. It was probably more hobby farmer for sure, maybe gentleman farmer. So, so kudos to you for getting into this market early and sticking with it and enjoying all these good years. And if we look at also the market itself, another good indicator for our market that in the last 5 years, 5 to 19% said their market has grown by nearly 54%. So you work with a lot of other businesses as you go throughout your day and business and in personal life, and I would bet that not many businesses can boast those kinds of numbers in terms of growth. And I've been doing this survey, I think, 6 years now, and I've been seeing that number every year. So that's really, really optimistic for us to see that market continuing to grow. Just to provide a background about who is responding, this just lists, we break down just the major brands represented. So you can see the brands for compact tractors, zero-turn mowers, lawn tractors, and subcompact tractors. And you can see the names represented, Kubota, was represented most among the respondents, but you can see the mix as well with Massey and John Deere, New Holland. So you can see the breakdown here. This is another indicator that we look at, and probably not a surprise to you, but it shows the diversity of the market. And you can compare yourself with what your breakdown is and how it compares with the average of the respondents. You can see a lot of our dealers, although they're primarily identifying themselves as rural lifestyle dealers, that a lot are still serving production farmers. And I know that the rural lifestyle market has really provided a good balance as the ag economy has been pretty difficult the last couple of years and coming up a little bit, but there's still always challenges with production agriculture. And then you can see the good mix with landscape contractors and municipalities and construction contractors. We have less that are serving the construction contractors. That number, around 70%, is about average, and maybe a little higher, a little lower. So that's just something I think to look at, something that we're going to look at as well, and as far as that market and what it could offer you. They're using a lot of the same equipment that maybe our landscape contractors are using. So we put the market, our market, within the general economy, since we're so influenced by the consumer market. And of course, everybody is talking about and looking at the unemployment rate. We bounced around a little bit last year, down a little bit, but you can see that we're back up to about where we were last year. So I guess in terms of good news, we're holding about steady, even though this is less than what economists like to see, which is closer to that 5%, where they talk about an efficient economy. So some stability there, I think, although it could be better. We also look at home building. Again, this is looking at the market and the growth in the market. It's down a little bit. This might be reflective, again, of something we're seeing within the economy, which is maybe just a lull coming up into this year. So we were down at 56 in December. That might be related to just a seasonal dip. We were up a little bit then when I looked just yesterday at 62 in February, with 50 being growth neutral. But you can see, compare with last year, which was 71, down quite a bit. And then if you look at even 2 years ago, the optimism among home builders, that was 74. And that was the highest since 1999. So just something to watch in terms of overall confidence in the market. Okay, so what you're forecasting. So if we look at this year, we had, sorry, let me get caught back up with my notes. About 61% of dealers, I'm sorry, let me back up. 59% of equipment dealers expect total revenue of 2% or more. And you can see the breakdown here. Compare with last year, we had 64% expected revenue of 2% or more. And so on the screen here, that's the 2 to 7 and the plus 8% or more. So down a little bit, 59 compared to 64. We also, in analyzing this number, we look at weighted average, which is to toss out that little or no change number and look at the positive versus the negative. So we're seeing that slight moderation here. We have a weighted average for total revenue of 2.43, and that compares with 2.47 last year. So a little bit down from last year. Still strong numbers. If we look at aftermarket revenue, generally dealers are a little bit more optimistic about aftermarket revenue every year than they are for total revenue. So you can see that with these numbers as well. So we have 61% that expect aftermarket revenues to increase 2 to 8% or more. So again, that 2 to 7% plus that 8% or more. And that compares with 63% last year. So 61% for optimism of 2 to 8% or more, compared with 63% last year. And then looking at that weighted average, tossing out that little or no change, the weighted average was 2.43 compared with 2.47 last year. So we have some data that we are looking at going back a few years. This is looking at the 5-year trend. So you can see how we're up, definitely up from where we were in 2000. 15, both in terms of revenue and aftermarket revenue. But you can also see some of that, just a little bit a downward trend from where we were last year, and also a little bit down from where we were in 2016. So time will always tell in terms of trends, so we'll be watching this in terms of where this will go as we look at this toward the end of this year and see where the trend is taking us, and whether this is just, again, a blip, or whether it might indicate some kind of ongoing trend. The two horsepower categories for us that we look at the 40 to 100 horsepower tractor range, and this is numbers from AEM through the end of the year, and you can see that they're holding fairly steady, down from where they were, which in 2007, which was a really good year. And I'm always interested to hear from dealers who have been in the market for a while, if they can go back to 2007 and get me up to date on what was happening in that time frame. So we're down from that, but you can see that we are, as looking at 2016, 2017, which we're holding fairly steady, we are coming up a little bit on that in terms of those unit sales. This is a strong segment, product segment for our market, the less than 40 horsepower tractor range. And you know that manufacturers are introducing models in this horsepower range. And this is good in terms of looking at that trend. So if you look at, really looking at the decade, 2009 to 2018, we're almost getting to nearly double in terms of those sales. And so that's really positive for our market. And you can see the stair step, it's just going up and up and up. And so that's, again, something to watch, hoping and expecting that probably will continue to go up. So we asked dealers then to do a breakdown in terms of product potential. And we looked at 26 categories, and zero-turn mowers continues to dominate the market for, year after year. And you can see the optimism here. 66% are expecting 2% or more for sales increases versus last year. So it's a good segment. It's a high demand segment. Manufacturers are continuing to introduce models. We've seen when we went to GIE Expo, different, some in the prosumer type range. Last year there was improvements with seats and suspensions. There was also some different fuel options, such as propane. So it's just a market that's very, product segment that's very vibrant in terms of what manufacturers are doing and the demand for that market. The top 5 really stays about the same from year to year. Sometimes we have front-end loaders that might pop up into that top 5, maybe replacing the rotary cutters, but generally that top 5 is about the same from year to year. I did look at how the top 5, the optimism for this year and how it compares with last year, just trying to understand the trend. And for that top 5, the unit sales increases were down, optimism for unit sales increases were down 5 to 10% from last year. So just watching, again, that trend and seeing where that moderation is going. We're down just a little bit in terms of optimism, but still you can see the numbers are really strong as far as what dealers are expecting for the coming year. We also look at shifts among those 26 product categories, and seeders, drills, and power hand tools had the biggest shift in terms of the most potential for increasing sales. Seeders, drills were up to 18 from 23, and power hand tools were up to 12 from 17. I had talked with one dealer recently just about the seeders, drills, and what might be happening there, and he said in his market there was a lot of work being done on pasture, the reseeding of pastures, and so in your area there might be some push from conservation groups, agriculture groups maybe that are influencing some of this. There might be also some influence on this from the hunting market and feed plots. So I'm interested to hear what you're seeing in your market. And then also with power hand tools, I suspect that it probably is related to some of the new models related to battery power. But this is, again, something that I'd be interested in hearing if you are seeing some of this increase in potential among those particular product categories. So if we look at weighted averages, now this is diving really deep into some of those numbers to look for some changes, and you can see that weighted average, tossing out those about the same, are down from last year. And interesting enough, zero-turn mowers did have, if you look at the change from last year, that was the biggest change in terms of weighted average. So dealers are optimistic about that market, but again, that moderation, maybe just some caution is creeping in a little bit this year. Looking at the bottom 5 categories, this is just some of those, maybe not those big sellers, those big movers in the market, but definitely just the categories that you have to have on hand to really serve your customers. And so there is some a little bit less in terms of optimism among those categories. Products that dealers are adding, again, you can see here that strength in that under 40 horsepower category. It shows up as number 1, with nearly half, 46%, expecting to add those products this year, taking advantage of what manufacturers are developing. And this top 5 is been holding about steady. Just some shifts really in terms of how they rank in the top 5, but really the top 5 holds about steady. Again, if we look at the 26 product categories, chainsaws were up to 9th from 15th. Again, I probably think that's related to battery power, and you can let me know what you think. And cedars drills, again, showed up to 11 from 19. So those were some shifts as we looked down deeper into the categories. We've been asking about rental the last couple years, and this year about 45% of dealers said that they offer rental. That's up a little bit from last year when we were at about 40%, and the year before it was close to that 40% as well. So watching trends, there might be an increase in rental for among the rural lifestyle market. This year, skid steer loaders was the top product being rented. Last year was also skid steer loaders. And you can see as you look at the top 10, it really is shows those product categories that people are using for some of those major projects, whether they are homeowners or small farms or landscapers. And this is something that we're going to be looking at a little bit more in our upcoming Dealer Success Academy, and hopefully that you've been seeing some announcements about this, and I really hope that a lot of you have already registered for it. It's an online, on-demand conference that we're holding next Thursday and Friday, and we have an expert talking about rental on those 2 days, and it's Larry Kay, and we've talked with him before in podcasts and as well as our magazine, and he's a consultant for the rental industry, and he definitely says that dealers need to pay close attention to what rental can do for their business. And I just want to read something that he shared with me. He said that in the traditional business model of sales, parts, and service, the two that make up the most margin are flat or in decline. And that means a dealer has to make up 70% of his business through sales, and that's the area with the lowest margin, as you know. And then rental, which has gross profits, and he's seen gross profits of 30%, can be the solution. So something that we'll be looking at a little bit closer next week in our Dealer Success Academy. This year, we looked at labor rate, the first time that we're looking at this, so we'll continue to ask about this, and definitely something that dealers can compare their dealerships with, and maybe make some difference, some incremental differences that could lead to some big changes in terms of revenue for your dealership. So this year, you can see that 62% charge between $76 and $100, and 3% are able to charge between the $126 and the $150 range. That might be the influence of production ag in there in terms of that hourly rate, but we will continue to watch that and see where dealers take that over the next few years. We will be looking at this topic also next week in our Dealer Success Academy, and Bob Clements, many of you recognize his name, and he's going to be breaking down this topic. And he suggests that rural lifestyle dealers should be in the $95 to $110 range. And that if you're an OPE only dealer, that you should be in the $85 to $95 range. So take a look at where you are with that hourly rate, see how you compare with that $95 to $110, and then join in the discussion next week when Bob talks a little bit more about those labor rates. So we do ask, just as well as moving beyond the numbers, we ask about dealers and what they're concerned about. Every year they tell us that finding good employees is something that they're concerned about. Low sales margins usually is number 2. And you can see down lower, although we look at things like unemployment rate and housing market, dealers are really concerned about things that they can influence directly. So one thing I found, one stat I wanted to share is that, and this is according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, if you look at individuals from age 18 through age 30, they hold an average of 7.8 jobs. So those from 18 to 30, 7.8 jobs. So looking back at your past and seeing if that's how many jobs that you held in that time frame, I'm guessing that there probably has been an increase in the number of job changes. So, but this doesn't mean it's necessarily all bad, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But generally, dealers have trouble with finding employees, service techs as well, and Bob Clements is talking about that and providing some strategies next week, some good strategies for how you can find the service techs that you need for your business. Employees was also a topic that Mike Wiles, and he is a contributing writer for us, and he's also the host of the really popular AskTractorMike.com YouTube channel. And he said that millennials are looking for meaning, challenge, and flexibility when it comes to working at any job. And before we roll our eyes at that, there are easy ways that he suggests that dealers can offer this for millennial employees. In terms of meaning, he just talks about explaining industry terms such as absorption rate or inventory turns, being clear about what your margin goals are, sharing those performance numbers with your dealerships. It just shows how what they do affects what happens throughout the dealership. Challenge, a lot of this, can be related to finding ways for increasing responsibility, but within where maybe some employees have some natural talents. I've done some interviews with some dealerships where they have had other people in the dealership, like a receptionist, take on special events. She was really great at it. They used it for fundraising, and it made a big impact in their community. And it was something that she could do that added challenge to her day, but didn't take over really what she wanted to do with her job. So that's just something to ask your employees about, see where their talents are and see if you can add some challenge to their day and give more meaning as well to their day. In terms of flexibility, we know that the 8 to 5 job is changing, and for dealerships, it's probably more like 7 to 7. So that's changing, and it might, again, be a good thing. There might be ways to add flexibility related to job sharing. Mike Wiles even talks about maybe there's some ways where you can not have an employee for December or January during your time frame. So look for that. Ask your employees what flexibility means to them, and it might help with making them stay or be more engaged at the dealership.
Hey, Lynn, before you move on to the next slide, we had a question submitted on the prior slide asking for some clarification on the stat that you had offered on jobs.
Let's see. So was it probably in the just most pressing concern area?
Yep.
Let's see. Can you ask that again?
One of the attendees was asking what the stat was that you had shared on jobs again.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think it was probably related to the job changing, and that was Americans born in the early 1980s held an average of 7.8 jobs from age 18 through age 30, and that was according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. So hopefully that answers your question and provides some clarification there. They did say that, the number of jobs do decline as a person ages. So there is some, there is just some natural maturing in terms of employees, but something to watch in terms of job hoppers for sure.
Great. Yep, that was it.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, let me back up here. So if we look at dealer advantages, and this is where dealers can really shine. So one thing that we're seeing, we always ask about brands. So we know that branding is really important to you. The brands you carry, you've chosen very carefully. You display their logos on your websites and your outside of your dealership, and so we know it's a really important decision that you've made. This year, 52% of dealers say that their customers have a brand in mind most of the time or almost always when they visit a dealership. So what's interesting about that is if we look at last year, 60% have say that customers have a brand in mind most of the time or almost always. So that 60% has really been more what dealers have been telling us. So we're seeing a little bit of a dip of that. If you look at the optimistic view of that, I think that shows some opportunities for dealers. We know that rural lifestylers, that customers and homeowners are doing a lot of research before they come in, but there might be some ability to change their mind. If they come in thinking that they've done a lot of research, they might have a brand in mind, but they're still not sure, that's where you can really step in and influence that decision. And we do have some numbers to back that up when we ask dealers about where their product recommendations and how they're influenced with customers. 77% of dealers say their product recommendations are accepted some of the time or almost always. So that's a really strong number that dealers are telling us that customers are respecting you, they know that you're the expert, and they're looking to you to help them make their decision. So something else that dealers are doing to take advantage of what's happening out there, and this year, shop and service improvements were some of the top expenditures. Last year, retail was the top, so those two tend to bounce back and forth, I guess, based on what the dealers have invested in the previous year and where they need to take another look when they look around their shop and what needs to be improved upon. One thing that we've been seeing over the last several years, and definitely over the last 5 years, I think, is that dealers no longer need to be convinced about the importance of retail to their stores. And I think what really comes into play more probably has to do with how to make the best use of what you have with your existing facilities and with some budget that you have. And this is, again, a topic that we'll be looking at next week. We have an expert from Miller Whitman, Paige Whitman, and she's going to be talking about some easy ways for you to really improve how your retail environment is presenting an experience for dealers. So hope you tune in for that. So I talked with you a little bit earlier that we said we had asked about some open-ended questions, and there was a lot of response and a lot of detailed answers. So thank you to dealers who take the time to really share their opinions. So we boiled it out all down in terms of just kind of looking at where those top words pop out, and you can see sales and service, definitely an opportunity for growth there. But you can also see words like margins and also words like rental. So, and then up above, you can see that zero-turn mower showing up as well. And just to share some direct comments from dealers, one that I found was interesting, one dealer talked about they are spearheading a buy local campaign. So we know that there's a lot of work being done by Independent We Stand and the Small Business Administration in terms of the buy local. A lot of times it has to do with, you know, that Small Business Saturday after Black Friday, but this dealer is taking the stand and really trying to push the buy local year round. Another dealer in looking at rental, they said that they're looking at specialized pieces that the rental houses are competing with aren't offering. So that, again, they were looking at the drills, the no-till drills, disc harrows and manure spreaders, and also they were looking at some more government opportunities. So let us know what you're seeing in terms of opportunities for growth. We'll definitely look at some of those areas closer and hopefully find some experts as well to help you help you get some more revenue from those areas. Top concerns, you can see that the word service, I'm sure, relates back to margins, relates back to finding service techs, so that shows up here as a top concern as well. Employees, definitely, so you can see all those words there. And as I look at some of the markets, some of the responses from dealers, The unstable ag market, one dealer said, there's not much that we can do about this. And definitely that's where the rural market comes into play in terms of providing some of that stability for you dealers. He's also looking at constant recruiting for service techs, just constantly having resumes on hand, staying ahead of the pay curve. Another dealer talked about the tariff issues. That was something that came into play definitely on the ag side, but also in terms of the steel tariffs and some of those cost increases. So there's not much that can be done about that, but he says to counteract this, we've invested in sales training and marketing, maybe to address some of those changes. One dealer did share that employee morale. He said that that's definitely something that is overlooked, and that's something he recommends that he's looking at, and then dealers look at as well. And again, I think that can go back to maybe looking at some of that meaning, challenge, and flexibility. That if you're having some morale issues, talk to your employees about some of those topics, and maybe make some differences there. One person talked about health insurance. He's seen increases about 32%. Again, probably not much to be done there other than shop around, just watch those costs. And then he says he's feeling pressure from manufacturers to sell the less popular units that no one can sell. So that was those were just some comments that stood out to me on what dealers are concerned about. Okay, so I talked about that we had revenue. We had data going back to 2011 and 2010, and you can see here some trends. So if we look at total revenue over the past, looking back to 2010, you can see where we were back in 2010 at 49%. We're expecting increases of 2% or more. We're up over that decade, but you can see we're bouncing around a little bit, but down from where we were last year. 2017 was a year, and you'll see on the next slide when we talk about aftermarket revenue, that was a year that was a little bit down for our dealers. So still strong, but something that's showing some moderation there. And if we look at aftermarket revenue, one thing that if you look at 2010 here on this chart, we're at 64% for optimism of 2.8% or more. And if you look at total revenue, is at 49% in 2010. So if there's any long timers out there, I'd be interested to see what was happening back in 2010. And you can see then the numbers where dealers are generally more optimistic about aftermarket revenue, but down a little bit from where we were last year. 2012 was another year that was down a little bit. That was an election year. That was also the year where there's the term fiscal cliff. We were having a fiscal cliff or watching for that back in 2012. So that kind of explains some of that happening back then. So this is definitely something that we'll continue to watch and provide some balance as we look at trends coming forward in the coming years. We also looked at 10-year trends for product sales for optimism about increases, and you can see 0, 0, 0, 0 really throughout the years. There was a lot of activity within utility vehicles, really becoming strong in the market, so you can see that showing in there. And then again, you can see the tractors less than 40 horsepower showing up again back in 2013. But zero-turn mowers have really been driving some great sales for our dealers. And then if you look at 10-year trend for products that dealers are adding, this is influenced by new products coming out from manufacturers. And then so you can see that tractors less than 40 horsepower is really a strong driver there, and then utility vehicles as well. So that's definitely, I think, with our dealers, we've got some really good, strong categories there with zero-turn markets and the 2 horsepower categories and utility vehicles, and lots of good energy in the market around there. So if we look at growth in the market, and this is that chart that I talked about earlier where we were at 5 to 19% growth of the market, or 20% or more. And you can see, really looking back over the years, just how great the rural lifestyle market has been. in terms of market growth, and we're down just a little bit from last year, but still really on the upward range of that. So good news there. And this is what I talked about earlier when I talked about some influence of dealers and the brands. You can see for brands being requested, we are down from really where we were throughout the last 10 years. So that shows some changes there among brands. It might show some changes related to brand awareness among new buyers or brand loyalty. So some opportunities there to definitely get your brand out there, whether it's the manufacturers you carry or the dealers or your dealership yourself. So think about that branding, and now's the time maybe to work on that a little bit. And then also on the other side, you can really make some influence among your consumers in terms of the brands they're considering. And here again, you can see that the influence that you have and your expertise really strong, and even up from where it has been the last few years. So you're making a difference with your customers and helping them make some really good decisions for their properties. So now we'll look ahead a little bit. And these are some things that I'm watching, and definitely would like some input from you and what you're watching. I've been really interested in financing technologies. We talked with some experts from Capgemini in August about the technologies that are coming into some other industries, artificial intelligence, and there's been lots in the news about blockchain and smart contracts. But they're saying that these technologies have been slow to come into the equipment finance industry, and really that they need to be there. So they're urging dealers to talk with their financing partners, ask where they are in developing some of these technologies, and urging them that you need them, because all of these technologies have to do with speed. And you know that consumers want things to happen fast, they want approvals fast, and they want the purchasing process to happen fast once they make their decision. So, and some of you are even using artificial intelligence now with chat boxes within your own websites. So it's really time that these really become more evident in our market. Battery technologies, this is something that we look at when we go to the GIE Expo every year. And you know you're seeing this as well in terms of batteries. And one thing I thought was interesting, and when we talked with Todd Teske from Briggs & Stratton, as well as Bjorn Fischer from Steel. Todd Teske talked about trends he's looking at, which was electrification and the Internet of Things, which is connectedness, machines, and EFI, of course. And he said that that we're not just an engine company, we're a power company. So watch more from where Briggs is taking the power, and definitely with electrification. And then Bjorn Fischer from Steel, he talked about emerging technologies related to digitization. And he said that Steel is spending a lot on research and development about connected versions. And you've definitely seen that throughout the market with robotic mowers. Looking at the economy, we talk with some experts from ITR Economics, and they provide some really good data for us and for you, and we have some podcasts from them. They talk about a lull coming up this year, so definitely not seeing a drop and a lull, and they're saying that lull is actually probably should have happened about 6 months ago and was delayed a little bit because of some of the tax reform. But so it'll definitely be showing up this year. And then they also talk about there's some upswing coming though in 2021. So as you're doing some long-term planning, be prepared for maybe some dip, but also don't think that it might be long-term, because they're saying that it will come up in 2021. But then looking more long-term into 2030, they're really still talking about that major depression. So they talked about it last year, and again holding steady on that outlook. So in that 10 years, a lot of you will be doing maybe really retiring from the businesses, and definitely be working on your succession plans. So I would encourage you to maybe talk about some economic scenarios as you're doing those succession plans. And one thing I wanted to share, as we look at all of the data and all of the trends, you know that what happens within your stores is really the most important and the most critical. And I wanted to share just something that happened to me recently. And this, I went into a dealership, and this was a dealership in a small town on Main Street. So when I walked into the dealership, there was a big window on the right side, and I imagined that it was probably maybe the service manager was in there or the location manager, and they were looking at their computer. So they might not have been the person that greets people. I don't know, but they were looking at their computer. So if I'm looking in and coming into a dealership and I see a big window and I'm looking at somebody, I can see them. So that means that they can see me. And so that was just kind of the first step. And somebody should have looked up. Somebody should have just given a wave, even if they weren't responsible for seeing what I needed. That was just a really microsecond where they could have made an impact. So then I looked over to my left, and the park person was really the person that was supposed to be working with me, and they were looking down at their phone. Now, they put it down right away, but there was, again, those seconds from when I walked in, I saw them looking at their phone. I should have seen them looking up right away. I should have seen those two people looking up right away. Now, they did a great job in providing what I needed, but if you're looking at new customers especially, those first impressions are so important, and they have to know that, that they're your top priority when they come in. So definitely just look up, put down the phone right away. I know that a lot of people are using phone for business, and it really dominates all of our life, but it just, customers cannot see us, cannot see dealers really on the phone. So I've mentioned early on about our Dealer Success Academy next week, and this is a no-cost event, again, online and on demand. So I hope that you jump off from this webinar and head on over to the Dealer Success Academy website and register. So you'll get an email that has a link for you to join in that day. The presentations will be open from 9 to 6 Central all throughout the day. So you can pop in when you can throughout the day. Encourage your people to do so as well. Maybe it's a training opportunity where you bring people into a conference room and join in. So we hope that you take advantage of that. It's our first one, and we've had really an overwhelming response from dealers that have registered. So we're very pleased that the topics are providing what you need. And also, I wanted to just encourage you to take the chance to shine. I know that a lot of times you're just, your head's down, you're working hard, whether it's in the shop or out in the field, talking to customers. Take the time to really look at where your successes are. I know that we're in this market, the dealers are a humble group, and that's a great virtue, but we have our dealership of the year, and this is a chance for you to take a look at your dealership, to promote what you're doing, to give some pride to your dealership, to your employees, and really to shine within the market and within your communities. And it all starts with just a nomination. Our nominations are now open, and they do close next week. So take the time, just nominate your dealership. All it takes is some basic contact information and a paragraph about your dealership. So please take the time to do that. We'd love to see more nominations coming in. We've got some great dealerships that have already submitted nominations, and hope to see yours as well. And here are two quotes from the dealers that presented or that took home the recipients last year, the single store dealer, Ranchland Tractor, and ATV. And you can see he talks as well about that, the goals and the stretch goals, and really forcing them to move forward in their dealership. And Sherwood Tractor, our multi-store dealer, he had a really interesting quote as well, that he tries to be a better dealer every year. So those are some people that you can identify with and people you can learn from. And it's all really part of this community within our rural lifestyle market of taking the strong market and moving it forward. So if I can ask you to do two things throughout your busy day, is sign up for our Dealer Success Academy next week and watch for that email. And then take the time and just go to our website, rurallifestyledealer.com, and you'll see the nomination form, and go ahead and submit that. And that really wraps up what I had wanted to present in terms of all the numbers and trends. And I know that I've probably talked quickly, so if anyone wants me to go back and clarify anything, I would be glad to do so. Or if you have any questions about these topics or anything else I'm seeing, I'd be glad to take any questions now.
Yeah, Lynn, we do have a few questions here. Going back to that brands requested or brands being requested slide that you had, I know Our friends Bob and Sarah from Bob Clements International over the years have always banged the drum that the brands you carry are certainly important, but your dealership should be the primary brand that you're proud to represent. Do you think that has impact on that number, that brands being requested being a little bit down from where it's been, that the dealership is the key there?
I think that's a really good point, and thank you for bringing that up, Dealer. I do think that there's been a lot of changes since I've been covering the market, which is about 6 years. A lot of changes definitely on the websites, where dealers are no longer relying just on the manufacturer website for sure, and also moving beyond, using what the manufacturer provides for photos and videos, but moving beyond that. So all of that sets up your brand because it shows off your dealership, it shows off your people. So I think that's a really good maybe trend to watch, and that's also where your strength is. People know you, they see you in the community, they see you, out and about. So I know it might be a little pressure in terms of always having a personal brand, but if you look back at our coverage of Bart Sherwood from Sherwood Tractor, he has taken this really far within his dealership, and he stars his own TV commercials and has done it for many years. And he credits a lot of his success with those TV commercials. Mike Wiles from our expert talks about YouTube and videos and how important it is that you just make the connection. And he actually talks about next week, if you tune in, about he even suggests that it may be even more important than some of your in-person relationships. So all of those efforts that you're doing on social media, on your websites, it's having some impact.
Great, thanks. Now you touched on battery power there a little bit. What do you see the biggest opportunities for growth coming in the years ahead? And where do you see battery figuring into that?
Well, a lot of the manufacturers talk about the power aspect of it, that now the commercial users are now getting the power they need to go out, the longevity with the battery so that they can be going out all day. A lot of it too, I think, if you just look in terms of our world is about gadgets, and it's also about, being environmentally responsible or, sustainable, easy to use. I think all of those things come in when you look at battery power. And if you look at people around their properties, they want to move around their properties. They want to use chainsaws, wherever those trees are or the timber. So I think it just provides maybe a new way to use equipment, a way that might be more easy, more fun. And definitely, I think on the landscaper side, just having that reliability of power so that they can keep going all day and do the jobs that they would have been doing before.
All right, we've seen some changes and some shifts around on the manufacturer side over the past year. What sort of a feel do you have for the number of manufacturers entering this marketplace versus those who've been in the marketplace for a while?
Well, we definitely see that with zero-turn mowers, that there's entrance within that zero-turn mower market every year, and because there's opportunity there, definitely. And also, when I talk to some manufacturers, they talk about the low barrier to entry with zero-turn mowers as opposed to tractor manufacturers. So we'll probably definitely see some more zero-turn mower entrance in the market. And then also we also see some more entrants just on the battery powered side as well. So probably taking advantage of some of that research and development that's happening out there, and then that low barrier to entry. There has been some other things that I just watched, just because sometimes when you go to some of these trade shows, you see a sea of zero-turn mowers or tractors, and so it's always interesting to see some new changes. Again, some more robotic mowers coming out. There was some new slope mowers last year at GIE. So a lot of movement also as well within the UTV market. That's definitely another area where entrants are coming in, and they're coming over from the power sports market. So I'm looking at this in an article I'm writing right now, where some power sports dealers and power sports manufacturers are seeing what's happening in our market, and that there's really a lot of demand within that crossover UTV segment. And so there's entrance in that, and demand is good for that as well.
Great. Now, in looking back as you did this year over the last 10 years of the report, was there anything in there that really jumped out at you or that caught you off guard that you were surprised to see?
Well, I think earlier, like I mentioned, starting out that first 2010, where dealers were with optimism. I think that's just interesting. I'd like to kind of look back and see what the changes were there. I think looking at, again, that change with branding, looking at some of those changes related to some of those, maybe some of that specialty equipment like Cedars drills, talking about some opportunities. So within our niche, there might be some niches within that. Something that I'm interested in too is that when I look at government sales, it doesn't seem to be a real big change from year to year. So I'm not sure, what that's related to, whether it's just too difficult to get into that market. There's definitely some changes within ownership models. We talked a couple of years ago about leasing, and I'm not seeing that too much within our market yet. I'm not hearing dealers talk about that, although that seems to be an option that would work with the contractors, whether the light construction or landscapers. So I'm interested to see what might be happening there. Also some changes probably with ownership. We talked about rental with, that change in kind of ownership and renting. And then there is this kind of shared economy out there within the consumer market. And I did a story last year about some rural lifestylers who wanted a specialty piece of equipment and they wanted that slope mower and they went in together and bought it. So there might be some opportunities there in terms of this sharing economy and shared ownership.
Well, that's just about all the time we've got for today. It looks, thanks for digging so far into the numbers, Lynn. There's a lot to digest there, and it looks like overall things are pretty optimistic heading into this current year. Today's presentation and audio are going to be made available on rurallifestyledealer.com in the event you'd like to go back to review it. So just keep an eye on your email, and we'll also promote this in our daily and weekly newsletters upcoming. So keep an eye on that for more information. On behalf of Lynn and everyone here at the Rural Lifestyle Dealer team, thanks for joining us. When you leave, you're going to be directed to a short survey. Please feel free to reach out to us and let us know what you thought of today's event. And if there's anything that you'd like us to cover in the future, we'd be happy to take your suggestions. So thanks again, everybody, for coming today. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.